Hello and welcome again. This is Paul Sims speaking to you from Pharma. I'm based here in London, and I'm very, very happy to welcome guests from across the globe to today's webinar, which, as you can see from your screen, is called Superpower Your Superheroes. And that is in reference to the fact that we're going to be talking about realizing the full potential of a skilled, insightful, entrepreneurial, and, of course, the voice of authenticity in our MSL teams. And it does seem that we are increasingly requesting that they do a huge number of different things, taking on a huge number of different responsibilities. So I hope you will agree our superhero moniker is not completely off the mark. In a moment, I'm going to introduce our speakers from the companies you can see. But let me just say a quick word about why we decided to put this webinar on. And really, it's because the MSL role holds so much promise. I think that still, and I have been saying this for a few years, of any department within a pharma company, medical affairs still holds the most potential. Not only as we move, of course, in that role from a support to a strategic role, that's a phrase I've said probably 100 times in the last 3 or 4 years, but also because I think that the new currency of our industry is going to be authenticity. It's going to be the data, of course, that we can analyze, and it's going to be good quality customer relations, ones that are valued and trusted. And of course, MSLs not being in a commercial role, but still very much holding a lot of that trust. So MSLs, however, on the other hand, feel that their role is often driven in multiple directions. It feels that there's often a lack of strategic direction. There's even an identity crisis, as somebody put it to me on the phone earlier this week. And of course, as former academics and physicians, in many cases, they don't necessarily come with the same skill background, skill set, or operational background that others in the company do, even if they share the company's ambitions. So our aim in the next hour or so is to really understand what capabilities, what skills are best suited and where we need to prioritize in order to enhance MSL interactions and the engagement. We want to look into metrics. We're going to look at how we raise performance, how we actually should be measuring in order to, and what kind of performance to drive, what kind of strategic change and operational impact that is going to have. And then, of course, as mentioned before, it's about ensuring that those skills and capabilities are done so in an authentic way, in a legally compliant way, and in a way that also focuses on the soft skills involved. So I am, of course, aided. Hello, everybody. This is Paul once again. I think I may have just dropped off the line. Can I just check that everybody can hear me? Can my other panelists hear me, for example?
Yes.
Yes, okay, wonderful, thank you. I apologize, everybody. I didn't just get killed. I am still here, and we can continue now. So, as I was saying, or trying to say, I am being aided in this with some great people, as you can hopefully see on your screen right now. I would like to point out before I introduce them that each one of these people will be talking on a personal behalf, i.e. they may have a company name next to their name, but they are not today representing their companies, and we're going to hopefully have a very fluid and honest chat as a result, but absolutely not necessarily representative of their company view. So let me just take one by one. Emma, who has been with Amgen for 11 years now in a variety of roles within medical affairs environment. She has a focus on skills, capability, and knowledge build to ensure that medical excellence is indeed excellent, and of course delivering seamless solutions for HCPs in that. And before that, she was actually supporting business and strategic operations and planning activities. And even before that, she was working at in the communications agency, medcoms agency environment, developing solutions and strategies to support us in our activities. Thank you, Emma, for being on board. To Emma's right, you have Eddie. Eddie is the Vice President of North America Medical Affairs. Don't be surprised by his British accent that you'll hear in a moment. He's at Pfizer, and he's risen through the ranks of the company since 2010, when he joined. And before that, he was at Cubist Pharmaceuticals. He was also at Schering-Plough and Bayer. And he's a board member of Saving Promise, which is a national non-profit advocacy organization dedicated to domestic violence prevention and awareness. So some important work being done there. Thank you very much for being here, Eddie. And then last but certainly not least is Andres. Andres is the Region Europe Medical Excellence and MSL Director, a slightly expanded version of his title there. And he actually works in Novartis Oncology. He has 10 years of experience in the industry, different roles: medical advisor, MSL manager, therapy area head. He also worked at Wyeth before the acquisition in rheumatology and in Grünenthal in pain, and actually hails from Argentina but has lived in Spain since 2005. Well, actually, no, I believe he's been in Italy since 2017. Is that right? So yeah, a global citizen, absolutely, and really pleased that you could be with us, Andreas. So I'm going to start today's conversation with a question. And if you look at your screens right now, you should see this appear on them. So, do you believe your company is investing sufficiently to equip, manage, and empower MSLs? So if you can each have a look at those 5 options and select one of them. We've got, yes, our MSLs are prioritized and well-funded. So, you're doing great. Partly, but you're lacking in capabilities and skills, mainly. Partly, but you're lacking in empowerment, reach, or in the actual physical numbers of MSLs. So you need more muscle, perhaps, in your department. Partly, but lacking in management support or role clarity. So this is more of it's not set up correctly, or it's not being supported correctly. Or just a simple no across all regions. They are underfunded, and therefore there is a significant gap in being able to do what we want and what they are doing in their job. So I can see roughly half of you have already voted. I'll hold that open another 3 seconds. So keep getting those votes in, please, everybody. 3, 2, 1. Thank you very much. And let's have a look at the results. Okay, so we've got a kind of normal distribution from the looks of things here, with a bit of an emphasis on the lack of empowerment and lack of management support. Unfortunately, I suppose, minority on the underfunded, but also a minority on the people feeling very comfortable here. So this is a good point, I think, to welcome our panel in to have a chat about these things, and maybe they can articulate how they might have answered the question. And really, if these are common pain points, then what are the things that actually can be done to move the needle on each of them? So, Emma, just because you're top left on the screen, maybe you could kick off, and then the others can chime in.
Okay, thank you, Paul, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to join this discussion today. I think, it's really at the heart of everything that I'm working on, the superhero element, and we are asking our MSLs to do more and more. And in order to ensure that they can do that and don't feel the pressure, we need to definitely invest in them in terms of building their skills, knowledge in new areas, helping them to adapt to new ways of interacting, using more technologies, and focusing more from going to have a nice discussion about data to actually going with a purpose in mind. I think it's very much a change in kind of our expectations, and also in terms of what they potentially signed up and joined the company to do. So we go from them focusing on the high science and being that credible source of information to asking them to actually help in a strategic way more. And I think, it's fair to say that not everybody wants to do that and wants to change their focus. But I think, there are ways that you can help in that evolution. And I think ultimately, that's the way that we can demonstrate to our business partners and commercial partners that the investment should be made is helping to show that value that we're bringing. I think, we're in a unique position where we have we're at the cornerstone where we talk both with our internal stakeholders and also with the external environment. We can reach more healthcare professionals and different external stakeholders than our partners can. So I think the more we can demonstrate that, then the easier it begins to show the need for that investment. I think, for me, we do need to invest in terms of technology in helping people move forwards. And it's not just, it doesn't need to be just a tick box thing. It needs to be a continued investment to help people see that they are valued. I think, one of the other struggles we have with MSLs is that there is little opportunity for a kind of career pathway or progression. So any way that we can invest in their skills, capabilities, and reward them for that knowledge build, whether that is becoming a coach or becoming a digital expert or something, I think that also helps to kind of empower them to kind of build their skills, and they see the value of themselves.
Okay, thank you, Emma. Anyone else?
Yeah. So, okay, go on.
No, this is Eddie Paz again. Thanks, Paul, for the opportunity to participate in this. I'm not surprised, I think, by the poll results that I'm seeing here. I think the whole area around capability and skill training for MSLs is one that is shifting. I think from being data clinical experts, increasingly we're relying on MSLs to be both interpreters and communicators of what is becoming an increasingly diverse source of what we consider as data. So it's not just clinical trials anymore. Real-world data becoming more important. If you look at things like Google, it's one of the most predictive ways to predict the spread of flu across a country or region just based on people searches. And it's a fundamental change, I think, in the way that we think about our MSLs and the capabilities that they need moving forward. And in turn, I think that feeds back somewhat into having that role clarity and that management understanding of what an MSL team can achieve. I think it translates both across clinical and commercial cross-functional partners within organizations. The MSL role traditionally has flipped across a number of reporting structures, whether it be commercial, whether it be R&D. But it really is a unique role that has tremendous potential in achieving what we all feel it can achieve.
Yeah. So, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. This is Andres Stern. So, to add to this, I feel quite represented with the people that voted the lacking in management support or role clarity, not because we don't have role clarity. Of course, we know perfectly what is the role of the MSL. But I said that I feel represented because in my personal experience, sometimes I do find this situation in which many times you have to explain. And I think that this is mostly linked also because sometimes we might be lacking on clear, for example, metrics, which I guess this will be another topic to be discussed. But this really sometimes is behind this lacking of management support or role clarity, because we really focus on much more qualitative results and interactions, and so it's really linked to a very difficult situation on how to demonstrate quality. And regarding the rest of the lacking situations, I think that also it kind of comes and goes. Depends on the cycle you are in within your company, within your compounds. This pretty much comes and goes, and you have ups and downs. So I think that it's a quite dynamic situation. I cannot say that it is something that it's constant across time.
Okay. Thank you very much, each of you. Really appreciate your opening thoughts. I was on a call at the beginning of the week with a range of commercial leaders, and I was asking them, the theme of the conversation was collaboration. I was asking them about medical affairs and MSLs and what, from their point of view, were the barriers towards doing more with medical. And obviously, it's not necessarily their place to say, but they felt that touches of what you were sort of pointing on, the person I was talking to described it as a bit of an identity crisis in terms of it not being clear exactly, not just from the rest of the organization, but within medical affairs itself, as to the precise purpose, not just today, but going forward as well, what the precise value is. And certainly in the run-up to this webinar, we had a good conversation about the difficulties in gaining investment for medical affairs in general. So having to sort of justify without pushing, obviously, ROI as a reason, but having to justify greater investment in medical affairs. So what's the solution there to not only solving this identity crisis, but also making it very clear as to why and what our role is within the rest of the organization? Because personally, I feel that must be part of the solution, no?
One of the areas I think, Paul, for me is around metrics. Traditionally, whether you're in a commercial, a sales function, those metrics tend to be hardwired into an organization. So it could be sales, it could be number of prescriptions, it could be profit. And similarly, when you look at the R&D side, clinical R&D, preclinical R&D, those metrics are also hardwired into the overall pharma DNA, right? So it's a number of molecules you bring through from proof of concept into preclinical, number of molecules you move from preclinical into clinical, and all the subsequent phases. So to me, one of the potential solutions is to actually have medical affairs metrics that are hardwired into the organization's DNA, and that should be at the highest level. There should be, I think, a separation of medical affairs from your traditional R&D organization. It can extend, and probably should extend, as far as having a representation on a C-suite level, and by that I think one can achieve alignment across all levels of the organization into strategy, how that translates into execution, and therefore how MSLs can actually feed in and bring value to that cycle.
And why don't we have representation on a C-suite level at present, typically, at the moment, then, Eddie?
Well, in my opinion, Pat, it's really because in a typical pharma integrated company, before market, you're focused on regulatory approval by and large. That's very much an R&D function. On the post-approval side, it's often focused on sales, prescriptions. Both of those metrics tend to be firewalled from a medical affairs organization typically, and the fact that we don't have those metrics hardwired, whether it be qualitative, as Andres had mentioned before, or otherwise, I think it's a gap that we should be working towards with our senior leaders.
Yeah, I totally agree with Eddie. And in my experience, it's really difficult to get real strong and convincing metrics that goes further than quantitative information, which for me is linked to what Eddie you said. I mean, it is clear what are your objective drives in terms of R&D, number of compounds you get into a proof of concept, for example, or after it is commercialized sales. We are like in a gray zone many times, right? In which, of course, it's clear that we have a key role in education, in management of the compound, safety management, etc. But that is really difficult to measure. But for me, for example, insights, it's something that must be really taken into consideration because they feed strategy and tactics. And when I say insights, I'm saying insights also that are translated into the needs of physicians and patients. And this is something that I think that now we are starting to really see as something that it's being taken into consideration and it's important. But this probably it's one of the now hot topics, right? The insight gathering. But apart from those ones and the typical metrics and how we can really solve this, as Paul said, this identity crisis, which I'm not sure. And this is something maybe it would be interesting to have a discussion also. Do we really have or not a identity crisis? So for me, it's pretty much about how to transform this gray zone in a very clear area in which we focus.
I think you make some good points there, and with insights, I think it's important that we supplement that with the correct investment in terms of creating a robust and streamlined process whereby that information can be collated and synthesized and escalated or elevated up to the region or to the global arena, and that we provide that feedback and reward for that contribution, because otherwise I think you introduce another requirement and then you don't show the people that it's benefiting the progression in terms of product strategy or delivering the right solutions for HCPs, and then they don't buy into it anymore. So I think it's critical we do that. I think it's also critical that we provide the right systems to help enable that. So not creating something that's time consuming, laborious, or too manual, something that's, easy for them to use, an app or something, even where they can see an instant kind of score, or they can, see if there's a trend in their country or across the region. I think, certainly we're not quite there yet in terms of that. So the analytics. I think, in terms of identity crisis, it's maybe, true in some ways, and that's maybe a result of two things. So one is a more local focus in terms of how the MSL resources are deployed and used. I think, it needs to be that way because, it needs to support and help with the local environment, with local product strategy or challenges with regards to reimbursement. So there needs to be a focus also in terms of evidence generation. But I think it's certainly interesting because across the companies, we don't use our MSLs in the same way. So, we maybe dedicate, some of our time to development studies, but we're not necessarily involved in site visits now. But in other companies, maybe the MSLs are overseeing CRO engagement too and study execution. So I think as a company, we need to also kind of think about what's the best way to manage that in terms of our expectations, and make sure they're aligned, and make sure that we have kind of a standard core of activities. And I think from a metrics perspective, we need to challenge ourselves a little bit more as leaders. We need to have really great compliance partners to help us navigate the new system in order to see how we can collaborate effectively but compliantly. We don't certainly want to become an extension of a sales force, but we need to show how we are impacting patient care, and that we can't continue to hide behind a kind of fence and say, oh no, we can't do that. I think we need to understand what is appropriate and not cross any lines, or even go too close. But I think we need to consider how can we show that by having an understanding of the physician and understanding his understanding of the disease area or the treatment landscape, etc., and kind of understanding why, for example, a physician is kind of not treating a patient with osteoporosis until he sees a fracture. How does that benefit the patients, and is he driven by the cost constraints or by reimbursement challenges, or does he really believe that you should be conservative until there's a clinical kind of presentation? And so we need to kind of understand how we can benefit patient care, and how we show that value, but it needs to be done in a compliant way. As you said, it's not a return on investment, but we do make significant changes and hopefully move the dial for patients. So we need to find a way to demonstrate that.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
How can we actually measure that, right? So.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to come on to measurement in just a second, as it's obviously been brought up now. But before I do that, you've heard what each of our panelists has to say about this investment question, and thank you for some insights there. I want this conversation to be opened up to the audience as well. So if you look on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see a questions or box, or a Q&A box. Perhaps you could, if you're listening in, just write a sentence as to what you personally feel would be the greatest single action that would actually boost and enable an unlocking of greater investment, so that we can indeed equip our MSLs as adequately as we need to in order to fulfill the ambitions that we have. So if I've already had a couple of people write in, Robin Maiden, thank you for yours, and I've had a few questions come in as well, which is great. I'll get around to those in a second. So let's make this a dialogue. And I promise I will only read out your answers to the investment question anonymously. So maybe throw in your thoughts there if you can. And in the meantime, as I've just promised, I think we should also ask you in the audience for your thoughts on measurement. So if you look at your screen, you'll be able to see a new question. What do you believe forms the best set of metrics for driving, determining, and justifying the performance of MSLs? In other words, how do we measure? So is it the knowledge of medicine and the knowledge of clinical and healthcare practice trends? Is it the quality and quantity of their interactions and their reach, the people that they are able to influence? Is it the insights that actually affect internal strategy? That's not just the strategy within medical affairs, but also the strategy within clinical trial and other development areas, even market access, and of course, patient engagement. Is it their impact on medical decision-making simply that we should focus on? And of course, the performance of medical affairs departments, therefore. Or finally, is it their ability to really see stakeholder needs met, not just HCPs, but of course, patients, and I could have, if I had more space, write a whole list more stakeholders into that as well. So please do answer this question. I've only had about a third of you vote so far, so come on, let's get involved. And I've only had 5 people respond to my call for how you would increase investment if you were perhaps in charge for a day. So I need some more activity from your audience, please. Okay, we're up to 50%. I'll hold that open another 3 seconds. So 3, 2, 1. By the way, I neglected to mention at the beginning of this that we've had nearly 1,000 people sign up for this webinar, which is a normal number for us, but it's a good number, and it shows that it's indeed an important topic. So I've got my eyes on those of you who haven't heard my call yet, so I can see that most of you voted. That's great. Let's have a look at the results. Okay. What do you believe performs the best set of metrics? It is a fairly mixed bag. Nothing really winning and nothing really losing. But we've certainly got up in joint first place quantity, quality of interactions. I'm surprised by that one, if I'm honest with you. I see that one as measuring activity as opposed to measuring impact. So I'm actually, got to be honest with you, a little bit disappointed that one registered with nearly a third of you. I feel like that's the era that the commercial side of the organization is trying to move away from, this kind of activity-based approach that we've had, which is of course very easy to measure, but not necessarily pushing us in always the right direction. I'd obviously love to hear some differing opinions on that one. And then the other joint leader, of course, is the indeed ability to see stakeholder needs met, and perhaps a wider variety of stakeholders there, more than just HCPs than we've been focused on in the past. So very keen to hear what the panel has to say. Keep in those answers coming. I've now got about 10 answers on the investment question, so keep those coming in, and we'll have the panel comment on these poll results while you're doing that.
Well, I have a very short comment from my side. Seeing these results, the first thing that comes to my mind is we have a problem. And I mean, not to dramatize, what I mean with a problem is that we probably don't have a clear idea of what would be the performance measurement we should follow, because we can see the diversity of answers. Most probably, if we ask this question to other functions, it would be much more clear. So this is why my first thought is we might have a problem, right? This is my first insight I can get from this result.
I think so, and I think it's driven by exactly that. Is we don't really know how to do it in an appropriate way, and as I said before, you need a good compliance partner to start to navigate and to start to evolve your thinking about what is appropriate. I think also the challenge we have is that you know, for the medical affairs arena, we don't have the same level, again, of investment necessarily as commercial partners. So things like external benchmarking or analysis of our field staff is challenging, because if you go down the same route as kind of the kind of BAI route, market research, and you engage with some of these companies that perform these things, it's often very expensive to be able to do something meaningful. There are also the challenges that it's difficult sometimes to get the engagement from the physician side. So even when you have the ambition, you can't necessarily reach out to enough meaningful stakeholders to get that good analysis. So I think, you know, as a company now, we're starting to understand, again, what can we do with, you know, just an interaction with the MSL, either asking a question. So maybe, you know, having a clearly defined plan for the year of what they want to kind of discuss or evolve with the physician, starting that, and then either having at the end of the year a self-assessment as to whether they have, you know, managed to provide information that has helped the physician to define patients better, or whether that physician has used the information that was provided to share with a colleague, or whether, you know, that physician as a result has developed, you know, something, you know, a new way of treating and managing patients in his institute. So I think, you know, there are ways to kind of do that, but again, it becomes very subjective. And then you have to think, okay, is it biased in some way by the MSL's interpretation? We could look at whether we can have physicians complete a questionnaire themselves, but then again, is it influenced by the relationship they have with that MSL in terms of their response? And you know, there are always challenges into how you do this, but And I think it's really reflecting why it's sometimes easier to say the quantity and quality is kind of the easiest thing to measure. So I think it really drives these results, but I agree, we do need to move away from that.
Yeah, if I can also comment on the quantity quality part of the survey, Paul, and in response to your comments, maybe a slightly divergent point of view. So I use quantitative metrics for two reasons and two reasons alone. One is to make sure that, since this is a customer-facing role, that the majority of the time is being spent externally. There tends to be what I call internal creep, where sometimes field-based medical colleagues become more and more engaged in internal processes that are often better left to other roles. And the second one is actually more around strategic planning. It's really to get a sense of deployment, and there's no reason why MSLs should be deployed on a geographically equal basis, but rather where the key stakeholders are, and the quantitative metrics actually help to make sure that the presence is where it should be, rather than just based on a map. And then in terms of qualitative measures, so actually increasingly moving more towards measuring those, and trying to assess impact in two ways. One is we field what we call an impact or satisfaction survey after every engagement, and then we aggregate those, and we have some algorithms to try and get a sense of what impact our MSLs are having externally. And the second piece is we expect each MSL to come up with a what we call a summary of demonstrated impact. We use the STAR or the SPAR format. What's the situation? What was the issue or the challenge? What was the action the MSL took, and what was the result? And we try and have at least one a month directionally. But then we also share those publicly on our internal websites, just to demonstrate what good looks like, or what good should looks like. So in other words, sharing best practice, but also it becomes a very useful communication tool with your relevant internal stakeholder, whether it be something that's impacting current strategy with a product that's marketed, or it's something that should impact clinical development. But just I think a couple of examples of how increasingly we're trying to measure impact, albeit in a semi-qualitative way.
Thank you, Eddie. Any final comments on that before I move on to reading out some of our audience responses on the investment question? Silence. Okay, fine. I will move on to reading out some of the. So, as you can remember, my challenge to the audience was what one thing would actually move the needle for you, and I said I'd read them anonymously, so I will. So, invest in our MSL leadership to a far greater degree. So there's a simple one there. More efficient ways need to be found to capture and share the insights. I guess that means internally. Better alignment of insights of HCP treatment pathways prior to launching in a new area. I think that C-suite support of in-field medical is essential for success. Does the panel think that's sometimes lacking? Convince leadership that qualitative accomplishments are more important than quantitative numbers. Identifying the gaps in capabilities that you see in MSLs and how you have to plan to close those gaps. Impact on medical decision making. Actually, that's a question. I'll come back to that one later. Increase investment need evaluation of before and after. Critical to come with a measure of return on investment. educational programs which might improve HCPs thinking about treating patients and understanding new pathways of treatment. I guess that person is saying what they would actually invest in. A few people responding to the quality versus quantity thing and whether that's a valid measure, and saying they're not actually that surprised. I think the panel echoed that, but it does have its place. It seems to be what people are saying. And then to invest in MSLs, the Medical Affairs Department needs to embrace a more commercial mindset whilst keeping at the core the essence of the MSL role. Short-sighted to hear people say MSLs are not an extension of the sales role. It is sales. It is, however, not selling a company, it's selling a company, a pipeline, or a research focus, not a brand. Ultimately, this person says they left academia to work in commercial organization, so embrace it and welcome the resultant investment. And they've put in brackets, intentionally provocative at the end of that responses, in case that was needed. I don't know if the panel wants to comment on that, but perhaps while they do, I've got a question here which actually speaks a little bit to what was just said in that last comment about the medical integrity. Is it being maintained in your organization? So perhaps while the panel maybe responds to any of those comments, you in the audience could give a multiple choice answer to that question. You can read out those 5 responses yourself. So any response from the panel to my to the audience's things? Yeah.
So I think, I like the provocative comment, and I think, it is true. I mean, that's what I was alluding to, in the sense that we need to evolve from just going and having a high science discussion to actually understanding that the MSLs need to go and talk about something with a purpose. So they should have a clearly defined objective. We are, in the need of thinking about how we plan interactions more and think about it more strategically and prioritize interactions. Absolutely. I mean, in the end, we all work for, companies that are for profit, and there is an intention. I think, the important thing is to remember where those lines are, and we are going to talk about a need for evolution of science, for evolution of research in a specific area, or to discuss data that are released in order to gain an understanding or insights from that position. So absolutely, there is an element there, but it's having the right intent in mind. But I couldn't agree more. There is a real need to understand, and also for the MSLs, it's not, the days are gone when it's just building the relationship and talking about science. It's they have to always be a part of something bigger. So I think it's right. It's just the way that it's executed and what the intent is. I think one of the other interesting points from the discussion topics there that were entered, and something that we haven't really touched on yet, is the importance in the leadership. I really agree, and so I think it's clear that the models in all companies are different, and often due to resource limitations, MSLs are reporting into people that not necessarily field focused, or have never maybe had that role, or any experience, and so they maybe don't have the skills to coach and to provide that kind of functional excellence or resource. So I think we have to find ways to navigate around that, and we have to invest in our first line managers in whatever role they are. So hold them accountable to core competencies, define what that looks like, and ensure that they can support their teams well. And not set people up to failure. So I think that was, also a very good point.
Sorry, I just dropped down for 30 seconds, my connection. So let me know if I'm saying something that was already said, but I liked a lot the comment around the selling part. Of course, MSLs in the end, they do have an impact in sales, right? But this is not illegal. This is not a compliance issue. This is a consequence of acting on treatment decisions on acting on management of a drug, on making the experience better, etc. This is a consequence, and this is nothing bad. It doesn't harm. What probably companies need also to understand is to, when things are going right, let's recognize that all the efforts cross-functionally in the end contribute. Then this is the fact, and this is a consequence that, of course, we don't just give our drugs for free, right? We sell them. But of course, we cannot be measured like that. But we need to be recognized also that our, of course, our work, our interactions, everything in the end contributes. But it's not our objective, right? And we come back always to the same discussion, and it is okay. Then if we are not able to be measured, right, by results, by sales results, okay, we need to find the right metrics to do so.
Okay, Eddie, I'm sure you, Eddie, just before you reply, I'll let you reply. Just 1 second. I'm just going to say I'm holding this. I'm going to close the poll now. Give 3 seconds. I've had about half people voted, so 3 more seconds. Get your vote in. 3, 2, 1. Thank you very much to those of you who've just voted there. So, yep, just got another 10% of you in. Wonderful. I'm just going to share these results. Eddie, back to your reply.
Yeah, I was going to comment, and I do like the provocative comments that I think it's critical. It's a critical capability for the MSL or medical affairs, for that matter, to understand the business of medicine and the business of healthcare. And it's not only pharma, but most hospitals, institutions, healthcare systems are really predicated on value, on cost effectiveness, on cost benefit. So it's essential, I think, that an MSL understands all of that and has the requisite business and medical acumen to be successful within an organization. And yes, there's often a link with sales, but at its crudest, if you're a sales rep, your reward is higher the higher the sales you bring in. If a medical organization and an MSL is doing the job properly, the reverse could actually be true. And appropriate use of a particular medicine in the system might actually lead to lower prescriptions. The reward systems to recognize that simply are not in place. It's something that I can say has been a topic of intense debate internally when you're working for a for-profit organization. But actually, if somebody is really bringing the medical acumen to bear and understands the proper place of a medicine or a therapy in a particular treatment algorithm, less may actually be of more benefit to a patient or a prescriber or a caregiver or a healthcare system than more.
Very interesting reply there, Eddie, and thank you for being so candid there. Yes, it must be indeed a fight between true authenticity and the very purpose of the company. Obviously, we've got some results here on the screen now to share in terms of what the audience thinks here. I would say yes. Okay, so there's a top-heavy balance to this, but there is still also a quarter of people saying that effectively the answer is no. So interesting that it's moved that far. I'd love to know from the panel whether or not these results surprise you. Obviously, this is an anonymous survey, so hopefully shows some degree of truth here with a large audience.
Yeah, from my perspective, I totally agree with the trend in these answers. I feel that yes, we are absolutely maintaining our integrity within the organizations. I feel really comfortable in that aspect.
I think, yeah, I mean, we're maintaining our integrity, I think, but I think, you know, as the majority of people have stated here, I wouldn't necessarily say it's an influence. I would see it more as an evolution for a closer kind of common understanding. It's not, you know, uncompliant to have the same understanding about a physician, to understand, you know, what their preferences are in terms of how they want to be contacted, how they like to receive information, in terms of how, you know, they interpret, like I said before, the treatment landscape, etc. So, I mean, you know, even if you do a kind of to use for want of a better word, segmentation as a separate function, in the end, you would still come up with the same understanding about the customer or the physician, pharmacist, whoever that customer is. So I think, you know, there is I wouldn't say it's necessarily an influence. I would say that there is more of a kind of commonality in terms of an evolution to that understanding of the stakeholders that we interact with. So I don't think it's an influence. I think, you know, it's a natural and required evolution.
Yeah, and I must say that if this, probably you asked me this 10, 15 years ago, my answer would be very different. So it took our time and our efforts in educating also. So I think that in this way we saw results.
Yeah, I think it's
okay. Sorry, go on.
No, Paul. I was just going to say. I mean, it's clear over half the respondents thought there was an increasing influence commercially. I mean, my personal experience has been a little bit the opposite way. But however, what I do see happening is that when there's a shift towards MSLs or medical, the expectation is that having a medical to medical conversation is free ranging, and I think that's where sometimes the perception of commercial influence, or just the lack of understanding of what an MSL role is about, often factors into this. The other piece, I think here, it's partly a self-made rod for our own backs, is that we tend to resource our MSL organization around new products, medicines that still have patent exclusivity. And once that goes, that kind of support or resource is withdrawn. A truly independent medical organization should keep that resource across all stages of the lifetime, even if not particularly commercially viable, because the depth and the history of knowledge that's accumulated around those medicines is actually a pretty unique capability. It's a pretty unique perspective that company, or that MSL within that company can offer the medical community.
Okay, thank you, Eddie. Once again, some great insights there. I'm acutely aware of time. We've only got, less than 5 minutes, so we're going to have to be pretty quick fire from here onwards. I really want to focus on one of the things that we said from the outset, which was really the future evolution of this. In particular, I'd like to just have a quick conversation about the digitization, which of course has affected every part of our industry and customers as well. And I'd very much like to just focus on that in these last few minutes. I'm going to want to do a quick audience question so you can see how we get on here. So feel free to throw in your answer to how significantly you believe that digital technology is going to disrupt the MSL's role over the next 5 years. A range of answers there, from very heavily right the way down to very little, with some nuances in the middle. But I'd love to just get a quick fire panel feeling, and we had a quick discussion about this before we started. So any specifics here from each of you, please? What do you feel is going to be the one thing that we need to tackle to really move the needle?
Well, for me, saying, of course, that digital scales, virtuality, etc., it's something complementing. Of course, let me be very clear that for me, face-to-face interactions are the gold standard always, will never be the old standard. So the capabilities are there. Now, if we talk about digital skills, other channels, for me, in order to enhance those interactions and leverage the digital skill, we need to focus more on how to tailor the data and information we're delivering, not only in the content, but also depending on the channel we are using. So this will automatically increase our levels of engagement and efficiency. Many times we pretty much focus on what we want to deliver and what is our scientific objectives, statements, etc. And many times we forgot that this is not about us, it's about them, about the HCPs and the patients. If we have that clear, then we are moving forward in the right direction. Then it's just a matter of how you better use the technology and the different channels, depending on, of course, your geographical situation, etc.
Okay, I'm going to close the poll before I'm sure that Eddie and Emma would like to say something, but we've got quite a good response there from the poll, so I'll close that. And maybe Eddie and Emma, feel free to comment on these results when you reply as well.
From me, I think, very, very short is make digital work for you. So help use it to also enable your understanding of what materials you need to develop, what's of interest, and get rid of things that are never used. And then I think from an AI perspective, maybe here that they will be face-to-face but complemented with AI learning. I think, a controversial point is the role of the MSL is going to increase as we see the commercial role decrease with electronic medical records signaling through AI, patient identification, etc. So I think for me, it will help and definitely disrupt, but enhance the MSL's role moving forwards.
Yeah, for me, definitely ability, I think, to leverage digital technology and have the capability to communicate accordingly, depending on the medium that's being used. And really, at one extreme, if you go into something like Twitter, how you focus your key information in a fair and balanced way with that kind of technology. And then the other piece, I think, is really just be led by the stakeholder. They should really determine the way they would prefer to receive the information and communication, and an MSL should be adept at recognizing and implementing that.
Thank you, Eddie. Pull rather than push. Really appreciate that. Okay, I'm afraid we are pretty much out of time. I actually had a couple more of these poll questions. We're not obviously going to have time to comment on any of them, but I'm just going to throw this one up in the last few seconds, which you can answer at your leisure, whilst I say a huge thank you to our panelists today. You've been marvelous in actually ensuring that we get through this topic. We probably could have kept it open for another couple of hours, but I want to be respectful of everybody's time. Likewise to those audience members that sent in questions. Once again, we've not really had a chance to do too many there, but we'll obviously be capturing those questions and trying to deliver some answers to those things, whether offline with today's panelists or perhaps another event. We are actually in the process of writing a white paper, which we've pretty much finalized, but it'll be out in a few weeks' time, and it's focused purely on the digitization of medical affairs. So we're going to delve into that into some depth, so please keep your eyes peeled for that. I can see about 40% of you have kindly voted to my question here. Do you feel the role of MSLs past, present, and future is well understood and appreciated within your company? So I'm just going to close that poll now, and we'll just have a quick look at those final results. There you go. So it's all of the answers are pretty low, with the exception of hugely varies by country therapy, so I'm not entirely sure we've learnt a huge amount there by that question, but at least we can see that there is a variety of different responses there from different companies. Huge thanks, guys. Really, really appreciated. I will just quickly share one very final slide with you, which is that we are going to be talking more. We're going to be talking more in 2 locations in the springtime. One of them is Barcelona, the other is Philadelphia. These are our flagship events. These collectively, well, together there's about 3,000 people attending these, slightly more in Barcelona, but both are significant audiences. They're not just medical events. Of course, I'm aware there are plenty of medical affairs conferences. These have dedicated medical affairs tracks, but they are one of up to 9 different tracks. So it's a great place if you want to go to get that specialism, yet at the same time be able to sample and network with people from other disciplines, which of course is something that we so sorely need to do within our own companies, and would love to see you at either of those events. As you can see, we'll be launching them both in October. Once again, huge thanks to our panel. I hope you've enjoyed the session. It is being recorded. You'll be able to share it with colleagues post-event or listen back yourselves. You don't need to email me for that. I get lots of emails asking me for recordings, and we will share that with you in due course. Thank you very much from both myself, my colleague Josh, and of course our 3 wonderful panelists who've given up their time and energy to be with us today. Any final comments? I'll hold open for 2 more minutes so you can throw in any suggestions, ideas, expressions of gratitude and undying love, whatever it is that you like, into the Q&A box at the very end there. So thank you so much, guys, and see you all very soon.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.